Hello and welcome to a new series on the channel where I will be reading my first 3 novels, a chapter at a time. First up is No Hard Feelings, Queen City Crime Thriller number 1, which I wrote in 2018. The story of hitman Paul Byrne, who takes a job he shouldn't and finds himself on the run from the criminals he double-crosses and the police. And if you'd like your own copy of the novel in paperback or ebook, it is available at michaelsantosauthor.com. In this first episode, we'll get right into Chapter 1. 11 at night, the Apostle's phone rang. Voice on the other end said somebody wanted him to kill 90 people. After years of such calls from strange voices, he'd heard it all. But that number, 90, was a new one. And this person wanted him to do them all at once. He arranged to meet the caller the next day in a public park, a nice neighborhood outside of uptown Charlotte. When the guy turned up, he wore a suit that was too big for him. He walked with a swagger he couldn't own. Scrawny, timid, and balding. Not the kind of human being you'd expect to organize a hit. 90 simultaneous hits. No, this schlub was a middleman to his core. The type that amateur crooks loved to hire because they thought a guy like this wouldn't be suspicious. Which meant an amateur had been behind the call. Somebody who needed a job done, but had no experience arranging such business. Probably learned how to do it by watching television, which meant they had no idea what the hell they were getting into. But that number, 90. The guy sat down on the park bench next to the Apostle. It was a sunny day, and the man's head gleamed in the light. A fountain burbled nearby, walkers took their dogs past, and the high-pitched shouts of kids filled the air. All with the backdrop of the glass towers of the city, where a crane swiveled around the framework of another new building. Then the schlub leaned in, kept his voice low. "It's an arson," he said in that accent North Carolina men often had, vowels strangled in the backs of their throats. "There's a club called Purgatory out on Wilkinson." The Apostle knew Wilkinson well. It was on Charlotte's west side, an area that had always been trouble for the city, and profitable for guys like him. He'd never been to this club in his life, but the fact it was on the west side told him what kind of place it was, what kind of people flocked there. "You know what I do, yeah?" "My client says they know who you are. You ain't a firebug, you're in the murder business, but here I am making you an offer, if you feel like branching out." "When do you want it done?" 2 nights from now, if that'll give you time to prepare. What I mean is, 2 nights or no deal." Playing it tough, as if the Apostle cared who the guy was, or if he was worthy of respect. This was a middleman, a tool for some coward who wanted distance from the crime. The schlub's voice had been deep at the start of the conversation, but now it was getting higher. His expression was an odd mix of admiration and fear. Wide-eyed, eager, but a quiver in his speech that hadn't been there over the phone. Doubtless, this was his first time in the physical presence of a killer. It reminded the Apostle of the way he used to regard the nuns in Catholic school in New York. Back when he was a child, young enough to admire all adults just for being older. Back when his greatest fear was the receiving end of one of their 3-sided rulers. But this guy needed teaching if he was going to make it in this gig. You either learned quick, or you found yourself on the receiving end of something worse than a ruler. "Give me a number," the Apostle said. 150. The voice was high again, like the kids playing in the background. That's what this schlub was in the Apostle's world. A kid playing office in a deadly business. "Less than 2,000 a life," the Apostle said, standing up. "I'm done." "No, don't leave, all right? Come on, we can talk about this." The Apostle sat back down. "I charge 60 for 1 contract, at least. More depending on how important the target is. But you ask me to do something outside my specialty, you better have some serious cash, yeah? This job's a big risk." "That's the offer, Apostle." Another power play. But middlemen never had the power. Any good operator knew and could take full advantage of that, especially when you negotiated with a schlub. "You want to kill 90 people in a fire," the Apostle said. "Burn a club. You need somebody worth more than 150. All right, the guy said, a quake in his voice now. "Give me a number, and I'll see what I can do." His face had gone pale, and one hand pulled on the other hand's fingers. He'd probably been told to hang tough on the price, and never thought about how it would feel to barter with a killer. Seemed like he expected the Apostle to kill him right there in the park like some Hollywood psychopath. That was the thing about the movies. Audiences loved the psycho villain who killed for the sake of it, the perfect adversary for the hero. But that wasn't reality. The Apostle was a person like any other. He'd grown up in a strict Catholic home in New York. That was the source of his moniker. The boys and the gangs and the mobs up there loved branding outsiders with whatever made them different. And the name suited him. He'd sung in his school choir, gone to Mass on Fridays, Sundays, and on all holy days. His family ate only fish after those Friday Masses. The problem with that strict upbringing, his father always felt the need to punish him for his sins. In his teenage years, the Apostle received plenty of beatings from his old man's belt or fists, and for the simplest sins. Lying about where he was going at night, fooling around with his girlfriends, bringing home lousy grades. He ran away at 17 when he was tired of that, got taken in by a friend of his who was in their Brooklyn street gang, a group of teenage and early 20-something punks that the bigger syndicates would scout for talent. The punks jumped the Apostle in, and he started his career. Wasn't long before the pros noticed he was good at pulling off the basic jobs. Burglaries, truck hijackings, holdups, the kind of work that taught you how to break the law for a living. He doubted the schlub had done anything close to that, but the Apostle had done it all, built up a reputation, started doing solo contracts. Hits, good ones with large payouts. Did that for 6 years before moving down to Charlotte in search of a new market. This was a big city now, not like New York, but big enough to have criminals in need of hired hands who could play the game. And with the smaller talent pool here, he was the best player in town. 200, the Apostle said, up front, cash or wire transfer. The schlub sat there for a moment, mulled it over, probably wondering if his ass would be on the line for agreeing to the counteroffer. He said, "Yeah, I can swing it," and stuck out his hand, like he'd had the extra cash to play with all along, the guy pissing it away because he didn't know how to deal. The Apostle didn't shake his hand, just stared straight ahead like he had through the whole conversation. Lately, he'd been thinking about retiring. Hang up his gun, live a simpler life, maybe get into something legitimate. A cool 200 grand could help make that happen. For that much, he did feel like branching out. "One more thing," the schlub said. "I'm coming with you." No, I don't need your help." "Not to help, Apostle, to oversee. My client wants me there, to make sure it goes fine." "Answer's no. You want me to do the job? I do it alone." "You want that money? You're bringing me with you. Otherwise, it ain't happening." "You ever work anything like this before?" The Apostle knowing the guy hadn't done crap. "No, I haven't. But you ain't done an arson either, have you?" "Once," the Apostle said, "to destroy the scene of a hit, make it difficult for the police to figure things out. And to send a statement to the people behind the targets. They could be next, and look what could happen. That's why I don't need your help on this." "You're getting it anyway. My client was firm about it. They want to make sure this goes how they want." The guy sounding more confident now that he had some real leverage. Saying, "First thing I'll do, I'll secure us a getaway car." A getaway car. Listen to the schlub. Did he hear himself? The guy acting like he knew all about how this worked, even though he'd already proven he didn't have a clue. No, the Apostle said, "let me handle that. I've got a ride I like." "We need something nobody had noticed," the guy said, so we can just slip away when it's done." "We don't want to slip away. We want to get the hell out fast as possible, yeah?" "But why? Makes no sense to me." "'Cause there's gonna be a fire. This isn't some discreet hit. It'll get the attention of the cops and all the rest quick. We're gonna do what everyone does when they smell smoke. Leave before it's too late." The Apostle rose from the bench, handed the guy a slip of paper with the number for a burner phone on it. He said, "Meet me outside Purgatory tomorrow night, 10 o'clock. We'll map the place. Next night, we go back and do it. Only use that number if your client disagrees about my fee." The Apostle didn't wait for the schlub to respond. He strode off, hands in his jeans pockets, left the guy with the rest of the children who had come to the park to play. Who was his client? Nobody who knew what the hell they were doing. He had developed a policy about employers like that. You cut ties as clean as you could, as soon as you could. 90 people. He was a hitman. His work was supposed to be personal, one-on-one with somebody who deserved a bullet for doing something unforgivable. He'd take his client's money, but didn't want anything to do with whoever would write the check. 90. He had a line, and that number was over it. The magnitude of this job might be new to him, but he dealt with people like this many times. He'd handle them, alter the plan in his favor. Bad news for the schlub. The apostle might have been able to teach the middleman, act like his old nuns, whom he'd admired and feared. But somebody like the schlub wouldn't survive the learning process. He was the type who'd always be on the receiving end, and the apostle was the one with the ruler now. Night of the arson, the apostle and the schlub pulled up to Purgatory, into the alley that fed behind the building. The place was freestanding, made of red brick, had a back door and 2 emergency exits. A line of people stood out front, blocked by a pair of bouncers in loose jackets, their coats a size too large to hide the bulge of their guns. Every few minutes, the door would open, light strobing out onto the cracked sidewalk and bass filling the air. Across the street from the club was a rundown apartment complex, one of those with 2 stories and hallways on the outside. They were common enough on Wilkinson Boulevard, along with shady auto lots, 24-hour adult movie stores, and a couple of ratty motels that offered extra services to anybody looking to pay for companionship. All the way over, the schlub had run his mouth. "We're gonna do this," he'd say, or he'd ask, "Ain't you nervous on jobs anymore?" Guy kept looking out the window, drummed his fingers on the armrest, bounced his legs like this job, killing 90 people, was some thrill ride. Yeah, that was it. The schlub was a kid on the way to the fair. He showed no respect for what they were doing, and that was a mortal sin in the apostles' world. Jobs weren't for thrills, and this work required a refined mindset. Taking a life was seizing control, and that's why you had to show respect while you did it. It was a transfer of power, not something to look forward to, not something to bounce your legs over. There was a sensitivity you needed, but this guy was a schlub, knew nothing about any of that. The apostle reached down to the side of his car's center console, pulled a .38 revolver from a special holster mounted there, spun the cylinder. It was his favorite kind of piece. He'd buy them 1 job at a time, dump them at Lake Wylie after. Only issue, the gun trafficking market here wasn't as good as in New York. You had legitimate guys, but also a lot of punks. You never knew if the weapon you were buying was new or had been part of a crime before. Easy way to get caught off guard. Add accessory after to your list of problems. The schlub watched the cylinder turn, dazzled by the spectacle of it. They sat in the apostle's black Audi S3, a car the hitman liked because it was fast and nimble, but looked sleek and refined. Not like the flashy lowriders and tuners you saw here on the boulevard. For assignments like this, he attached a fake plate over the top of the real one. The Audi had been a gift from some Puerto Ricans running a chop shop back home in New York. It had been stolen, but they'd customized it for him, added that special holster, put in a larger-than-spec trunk. A thank you for services rendered. One day, they called him up, said a brother needed to be punished for cutting a deal with the cops to get out of jail time. That kind of betrayal was another one of the mortal sins in the criminal life. The apostle had been up and coming still, but maybe they figured a guy by that name had to know something about punishing sinners, right? And now here he was, with another little sinner, the schlub, sitting outside a haunt called Purgatory. "We doing this?" the schlub said. "When you want to make our move?" The apostle didn't respond, just cracked open his door and made for the trunk. The schlub followed, kept repeating under his breath, "We're doing this, we're doing this." The apostle wanted to put a bullet in him now, avoid any chance for the guy to make the wrong decisions once they were inside. He grabbed bolt cutters from the trunk and motioned for the schlub to start unloading the 8 jerry cans they'd brought. "I agreed to take you along, but you aren't overseeing anything tonight," the apostle said. "You follow my every order. I tell you to do something, it's like I got it done myself, yeah?" "Sure, apostle, sure." "You think you're ready just 'cause we talked this whole thing through. Feeling confident?" The schlub looked all proud, still didn't get the apostle's point. "Yeah, I listened to every word you told me." The apostle pointed at the guy's chest, jabbed him with one finger in a black leather glove, said, "Getting in there? Things will be different. Maybe you've imagined the whole job out, but it won't be the same. You don't get creative on me, got it? You don't have anything to worry about with me, apostle." Not likely. And the schlub kept repeating his name. Patronizing him? No, kissing his ass like the apostle had become his mentor or something. "Unload the gas," the apostle said. "I'll get the door." Wilkinson was the kind of neighborhood where some folks put chains on the back doors, around both handles so they couldn't be pulled open. But the apostle snapped right through the chains that covered Purgatory's rear utility exit and eased into the place. He looked around for anybody who would take exception to him torching their club, but he was alone for now. The empty back hallway smelled of mildew. On the left, another set of double doors led to the dance floor, loud bass coming from the other side, reverberating through his body. Down the hall, he could see the electrical room. About halfway was the manager's office, a small space filled with old papers and clutter. That was their target, the perfect place to set the fire. "Start pouring the gas in the office there," he said to the schlub. "I'll disable the sprinklers." "What if somebody comes?" "Then you deal with it. Part of the job. Just pour and wait for me to light it. Timing will be everything." The apostle lingered a moment, watched the schlub's hands shake as he dumped out the jerry cans. Guy had the smile plastered on his face, a kind of self-conscious grin. Then it hit him. To the schlub, this was like a movie. Probably for years, the guy had aspired to get a job like this, waited for his big shot, his star role. The apostle had been the unlucky jerk to give it to him. That stupid grin, the overconfidence. It was like the guy imagined somebody watching him on a screen, and he had to come across the right way. He left the schlub to his acting. Let him go ahead and play the part of a professional. Just as well he should enjoy his first and last gig. The apostle disabled the sprinkler system down the hall, a simple setup, then turned to head back to the office. For the hell of it, he peered through the double doors, stole a glimpse at the crowd. The strobe lights cast odd shadows on their faces, but he recognized the types he'd expected to see. Junkies and their banging dealers doing business. Some hookers passing through the throng, hoping to score a client to take to one of those ratty motels down the boulevard. And low-level punks like the schlub, guys looking for their own shot at greatness. Then he saw the big man, Jack Vignali. The apostle had met him in New York, where their paths had crossed on an errand for the mob, the Italians who still claim the highest order up there. Vignali had been an associate in one of the families before leaving it behind, coming to the south. Maybe looking for new opportunities, same as the apostle. Or maybe Jack was here because he'd messed up somehow and had to leave New York. The apostle wasn't sure, but even on his own, the man was still a mobster to his core. Round body, hair slicked back, a leggy blonde on his arm as he sat on a curved white couch in the corner of the club. Vignali looked comfortable here, with his new crowd, like this was a regular hangout for him. Which meant Jack had to be the real target of the arson. The 90 people just a way to make it look like a random crime, not a premeditated hit. But the apostle wasn't about to let some schlub kill a man like Jack Vignali. He went back to the manager's office, found the schlub finished with the gas and looking down at his cell phone, thumbing the screen. The apostle skulked towards him. The schlub's eyes became circles, and he backed up, headed toward the wall. The apostle waited for him to hit it, savored the fear in the guy's expression, the startled jump when his back made contact and he was out of room to retreat. The apostle reached out, grabbed the schlub by the shirt, pulled him in close. "You didn't tell me Jack Vignali was here." "It doesn't matter. You have to burn the club. It ain't an issue of who's in it. You have any idea who he is? What kind of disrespect you and your client show by killing him?" The apostle glared at him, then released him and stepped away. He'd already made up his mind to knock the guy out, leave him there, make it look like the schlub had done this arson alone and didn't make it out in time. But the schlub's eyes narrowed, a look of stupid determination on his face. He reached behind him. The apostle saw a glint of silver. A gun. The apostle pulled his revolver, drawing faster than the amateur middleman. One fluid motion, he put a bullet in the schlub's heart. The guy collapsed, wearing a horrified expression, all the false bravado gone in an instant. The apostle stood there with his arm extended, smoke rising from the barrel of his weapon. He bent down and retrieved the schlub's piece, a little snubby revolver. Then returned to the double doors leading to the dance floor. Everyone still talked, danced, and dealt. The music had drowned out the shot from the back of the building, so he fired the rest of the cylinder into the air. Now the bass cut off, and screams replaced it. The crowd ran to the exits, trampled each other to get out. Vignali had vanished with the rest of his entourage. The apostle went back to the office. He'd been paid to torch the club, but killing 90 people, taking out Vignali, all that was out of the question. Still, he'd burn it to the ground as promised, and the schlub's corpse with it. He struck a match against his victim's shoe and tossed it onto the gas. He stayed a moment to see the flames take the room, then bolted for his Audi back in the alley. Job done, and the schlub, the one person who deserved to burn that night, would go up with purgatory. The police would think the schlub had been behind the arson, he was pretty sure. It would be the middleman's body they'd find there, after all, and the fire would probably do enough damage to the dead man to make the investigation difficult. But man, he hadn't intended to shoot the guy, leave a bullet behind. He'd just have to hope it would resolve in his favor, and be ready to move in case it didn't. So that was Chapter 1 of No Hard Feelings, my first novel. I'm curious to see what you think of it, and I'm also curious to see how my writing has changed over the course of these 3 books. So thank you for joining me, and look forward to Episode 2, where we'll get into the second chapter. And again, if you'd like to buy your own copy and follow along, you can go to michaelsantosauthor.com. See you next time.